And this will be the only time that staff will call a meeting to order. We'll elect a chair and a vice chair tonight. I just want to welcome you all. I'm really excited to get this committee up and running. It's been a long haul for sure. And so, yeah, both Matt and I are really excited to have you all here. And thanks so much for volunteering your time to serve. So first, at the beginning of every meeting, we have time for public comment. There's a member of the public, I believe, who's just coming in on Zoom. Darren Schidler from CCRPC is also on Zoom. Just wait a couple of seconds for the person to connect. So anyway, is there any public comment for things that are not on the agenda tonight? And hearing none, I think we can go on. Let's see.
Sharon had the hand
Oh,
up.
Sharon, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm not sure. Actually, I'm just jumping in and I will be brief. I really very much care about us evolving in housing as our needs for housing evolve. I love having there be more of mixed use and getting away from homogenous neighborhoods and neighborhoods that kind of make it so that you have to get in a car to go anywhere or do anything, or friends to meet up with friends. So what I just want to say is I very much support integration of like accessory dwellings or attachments to houses to include possibly more seniors who really don't want to go to senior housing, but they want to be closer to someone who can keep an eye on them. I live in a multi-generational house. I am blessed to have the resources to have that be, but I'm thinking other people might appreciate and have there be a shared benefit in cost, because there would be a share in expenses of that property, you know, taxes and everything and utilities. So if somehow integration of evolving our housing to match our present day needs, there's a lot more single people, single parents, and to have housing reflect more of a 2 adult and kids and 2 bed, you know, 2 garages. Like, let's get to 1 car garage, or even maybe not a garage, just to get more people into housing. There, I've said it. That's all. Carry on. I very much appreciate all of you and all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Excellent points. Yeah, so I thought like a good place to start would be just a round of introductions. We want to just kind of go around the room and just introduce yourself, and I don't know, maybe just a sentence about why you're here.
Since we're disrupting, do you want me to go first? So while you're looking at me,
Sure, whatever, that's fine, thanks.
Sorry, I was asking Matt the wireless password because I can't see it.
Oh.
Thanks. I'm Debbie Ingram. Gosh, I've lived here 21 years. I've been on the planning commission, the select board. I was a state senator. I am the executive director of a nonprofit that works on all kinds of different social justice issues, and affordable housing and homelessness has been one that we've worked on for a very long time. So I have all these things sort of in my career that have spurred me on to being here, but also I I just want to share that as our public comment person was saying, my niece, my 44-year-old niece lives with me. And she has a good job at UVM Medical Center in billing, but she can't afford to find a rental place, of her own. In Chittenden County, she lived for a little while in Waterbury and had to commute all the way to South Burlington before the pandemic. Anyway, she lives in my basement, and we're very much thinking about putting in an ADU on my property, so that she can have her own space in her 40s, for crying out loud. So yeah, so it's a problem that I understand on many levels. So glad to be here.
I'm Charlie McGill, and I've been actively involved in Habitat for Humanity since about 1986, including 5 years out of the country working full-time for Habitat. I am very convinced that while there's a need for a mix of rental and home ownership housing, that the way out of poverty is through home ownership. That with rental housing, the cost continues to increase, and once you get into home ownership, the exception of increases in taxes, you've locked in the price of housing, and people have been able to build up equity that can transfer to new things. So there's in my mind, there's a great need for true entry level housing, and I don't see a path to that, but it's my primary interest and my primary reason for wanting to be on the committee.
My name's Lisa Bradenharder, and I've been in Williston for about 10 years. My background is in tech. I had a tech company that grew very quickly and took it all the way to IPO, but I left that about 7 years ago or something. But during that time too, I was involved with refugees in Connecticut and elsewhere, and I really came to feel like the key to the refugee issue, at least here in Vermont, is around housing. You can't really bring them here if no one can live here already. And actually, I've been involved with the Brattleboro refugee efforts because their housing is much more affordable, and employers really want people and that kind of thing.
I missed your name.
Lisa Bradenharder.
I'm Marla McQuiston. I've lived here for 29 years. I'm mostly involved because my son has Down syndrome, and I'm part of a group of parents who are getting older, and we're trying to create more housing in the whole state for people with disabilities to have more options. And then affordable housing is going to be a big way for people to find more housing options. Some rental, some subsidized, and various other things.
Hi, my name is Monica Rivero. I've lived in Vermont about 10 years, half of that time here in Williston. I work for a small nonprofit called Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform. I work a lot with the homeless population in Chittenden County. I myself am a renter, not an owner. I am a previous homeowner, so I've seen it from both sides. And being a first generation American, the idea of the generational wealth of passing on, that's not really an option for everyone. So making that an option for more people would be great. I'm here because I love living in Williston. The walkability, like a lot of people have mentioned today and previously, is something that I find really important in communities. Having lived in other places where carlessness was okay, and I'm just really here to hopefully have responsible growth and make it inclusive, as well as bring in people from the fold of kind of keeping people housed or housing the unhoused. And like a lot of people here, I live in a multi-generational family. My partner and I, and his 20-year-old daughter, who's back from college and is figuring it out. So I hear a lot of that here, and I want to give young people an opportunity that some of us maybe did or didn't have, but with housing, the housing crisis and all of that, that's kind of like, we are, we put enough on them, I think, so.
Hi, my name is Scott Rogers. My family and I are relatively new to Williston. I in fact had contacted Matt, I think almost 1 year ago today, letting him know that we'd be buying our house in November and then moving here. So our first year has been really wonderful. We absolutely love Williston. Williston's just done so many things so right. So for me, to be a part of this committee is I've had a strong interest in housing. I did part of my master's policy work on affordable housing and the implementation of Section 8 housing vouchers. My day job, I'm a community development manager with a municipality in the area. I too, like you, work with the immigrant refugee community. Housing is the #1 issue. My wife is also a local veterinarian. And affordable workforce housing is also a high issue. People simply can't afford to live anywhere in Chittenden County and work here. It's gotten to the point where, like, if you're looking to get a young doctor to move here, they can't move here. They can't afford to live here. I was on a recent call talking about the settlement of resettlement of refugees, and they went through and said that there's just no housing left. It is all gone. So I know we have a deficit to make up, but I think Williston's made the right moves. I'm also excited about the options of putting in housing that's perpetually affordable. I think that's important to get that entry level for people, as well as also ensuring that we do have affordable rental units that are perpetually so. I've served on multiple housing committees over the years, found the NAACP in Eugene, their housing committee, and I've worked on a housing trust fund committee in Florida as well, but I'm happy to be here.
Cool. Darren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Melinda. And great to meet you all. And really excited to see the Williston Housing Committee take shape. My name is Darren Shibler. I work for the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. We are a metropolitan planning organization, as well as your regional planning commission. So we help support towns implementing and planning for and implementing their town plans, including working with Williston over the last year or so to develop their affordable housing or their housing needs assessment and help sort of kickstart some of these initiatives that you've been working on. So I'm here just to listen tonight, but over the next few meetings, hopefully I'll have a little more of an active role in helping get you folks started on a strategic plan and implementing that and looking at some of where you want to take this.
Great, thanks. And I'm Melinda Scott. I'm the town's energy and community development planner. I've been working for the town of Williston for about 8 years. I was the conservation planner for about 6.5 of those years, and I've been in this position for the last 1.5 years. Yeah, working on mainly over the last year getting housing supported bylaw amendments adopted by the town and getting a housing committee up and running.
I'm Matt Boulanger. I'm the planning director. I've been the planning director here in Williston for about 5.5 years, and was senior planner for almost 10 years before that with the town. Like Melinda and Darren, I'm really happy and excited to see this committee come together. And, you know, in working with Melinda over the last year on housing supportive bylaw amendments, which call for the inclusion of some more affordable homes in new developer-driven projects, we emphasized over and over again that was only one part of the solution, and that subsidized and deeply affordable homes would not be created through those bylaw rules, but there would be at least some integration of some more affordable homes in those projects. And we kept saying, you know, the full picture involves other programmatic efforts, and you're it. You know, there's a whole world we're becoming aware of out there of how homes for people at all levels of need and affordability are created and sustained. And you know, I think we've done a lot in Williston over the last couple of years to try to create a really good landing zone for that sort of diversity of housing to happen here. but we really can't just regulate it into existence. We need to look at other ways the town can productively make it happen, and that's what this group is all about. So, Melinda will be your staff lead here. I'm always available as well, but I might not be at a whole lot of your meetings. But there's a lot of commitment on the part of the town and the select board reflected in, giving our department the resources to really stand up this committee and this effort, giving Melinda some time to be able to put to it. And I'm really grateful for that because, in my regulatory world, which is where we spend a lot of our time in local planning, just regulating what comes in the door, I don't have a lot of answers. I have a very few answers when it comes to solving housing challenges there. And it really is exciting for me, having been in the town as long as I have, to see the town take this more proactive step. And realizing that one of the tasks of this committee will be to talk about how to spend some money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And that in our most recent regulatory changes, we have possibly a funding source for that trust fund, at least a partial source, in that new market rate projects will need to pay into that fund if they're not including affordable homes as part of their build out. So a lot of good things happening around this issue right now, and you folks are right at the forefront of it, and appreciate you all being here. So thank you.
Yeah. So with that, I hope not to spend a lot of time on this, but I'd like to go over just some nuts and bolts about serving as a volunteer on a volunteer board, and kind of what the expectations are. So
Not to post on Facebook.
yeah, right.
Just don't.
Yeah.
A good idea. Just,
It's the best.
So volunteers serving on a committee are expected to attend at least 60% of meetings each calendar year. We'll be keeping track of attendance and just to be fully engaged. It's important to try to attend all the meetings that you can. And let's see. And then, if you're absent, there is the ability to take leave of absence, for various reasons. And if you need to take a leave of absence, you can come and talk to one of us, talk to me. But if you are absent for meetings for 3 consecutive months without being granted a formal leave, then the chair will be alerted, and we'll then discuss the absences with the volunteer, and decide whether continued service as a volunteer is the best fit. And then, volunteers are expected to come to meetings prepared to discuss the items on the agenda, reviewing meeting materials. Hopefully there won't be lots and lots of things that we're asking you to review. I'll try to, keep it relatively brief and to the point. But you should feel free to ask me questions if you have questions about any of the materials, or, any of the discussions in the meetings. Feel free to just get in touch with me. I'm happy to speak to any of you one-on-one. And then, ask questions, be actively engaged during the meeting, actively listen, ask clarifying questions, and that kind of thing. So just, be cordial, respectful of others' viewpoints. You're not always going to agree. The other thing is, when you're making a decision, as a volunteer on a volunteer board, make a decision on the matter that you feel is in the best interest of the town. And so if you feel like you have a conflict of interest in any decision, you know, you should probably recuse yourself if you can always talk to me and ask if you think you might have a conflict of interest, but you're not sure. You know, just please feel free to come and ask me. And yeah, so then this last part is just, you can request a leave of absence for up to 3 months in the event of personal illness, care for a family member, military deployment, or extended time out of town for work in which participating remotely is not feasible. And that's pretty much it for the volunteer policy. Anybody, any questions about?
Are we planning to always have a Zoom option or, yeah?
Yeah, we will.
So if we're sick, we can.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can from our sick bed.
Absolutely.
Participating.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. And then I've uploaded this, not uploaded, but linked to this document from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, about the Vermont open meeting law. And I mean, I'm not gonna go over the whole thing. Basically, the open meeting law states that all meetings of a public body have to be open to the public at all times. And there has to be, a physical place, there has to be a physical place, and there can also be a Zoom option, for people to attend meetings. And that's just to further transparency in government and to give the public an opportunity to participate. And so as part of that, you know, a lot of these things staff will take care of. We're gonna post the meeting agendas, we're gonna take minutes, we're gonna post the minutes. All business will be conducted in open meeting. And then, when there is electronic participation, votes will be taken by roll call. We're allowing public comment at the beginning of each meeting. You know, so to a large degree, staff will, kind of make sure that that all happens. The one thing that I think that you need to be mindful of is, communication outside of, regular meetings. So, you know, that applies to email and phone, communication. So basically a meeting constitutes, basically any, quorum of this committee. When they're all together, it constitutes a meeting. Now, if you're together and you're, you know, at somebody's house at a party or something like that, it's not a meeting unless you're like discussing business that's related to your role on this committee. So just be mindful that if you're meeting, you know, if you happen to you know, be at the same place with a bunch of your committee members or even one other, just not to kind of discuss the business of the housing committee outside of regular meetings. And as far as email communication, really discourage any kind of reply all, like any discussion that happens, but via email is kind of just really try and avoid that. The only email communication that we'll have is when I send out the agenda and we're trying to figure out scheduling meetings, which we kind of already have. Presumably this is all a good time for you since you're here tonight. Meetings will happen once a month, the first Wednesday of every month. And you know, so when I send out a meeting agenda, and you have a question about an agenda item or something, just ask me and don't, you know, avoid replying all, just ask me a question, just reply to me. And let's see, And then, of course, you can attend meetings by Zoom if you wish. And I think, oh yeah. And then another thing we want to avoid is adding items to the agenda at the last minute. So like, you know, when we come together, if there's an agenda and there's like a burning topic that somebody wants to discuss, it's not a good idea to add it to the agenda right before a meeting. You can, you know, we can add it to the following meeting, but generally the agendas are fixed as a 48 hours before the meeting.
May I just ask, wasn't there another person that was appointed? Were there 7?
There's, yeah, there is another person, Bruce Fuller, he's not here.
Okay, he's just not here tonight.
Yeah,
And then a quorum, do we define a quorum as one more than half?
4, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be 4.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and that's regardless of how many positions are filled, so. Well, so that's a good question. There's technically 9.
9, yeah.
So,
Maybe it's 5, I don't know.
yeah,
But it's not one more than half, it's more than half. I mean, half of 7 is.
3.5.
I don't, we can have half people.
That's why
Right.
it's just- it is more than, literally more than half, not
More than
one
half.
half.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well, but it could be 2 or 3 more than, it doesn't have to be that many.
right.
yeah.
That's good. I'll arm wrestle.
So let's say, just to be on the safe side, let's say it's 4, for the purposes of open meeting law.
Yeah.
Until the new members come in.
Yeah, when and if, yeah. And then, yeah. I think that's all that's kind of relevant to you. Can you think of anything else?
You might hear about public bodies going into executive session.
Yeah, right.
And for now, don't worry about that. That's the only time a public body can sort of meet in private. Quasi judicial bodies like DRBs have something similar called a deliberative session, which Lisa's familiar with. But generally, you would be discussing a personnel matter, pending litigation the town is involved in, or a real estate transaction. So it's unlikely, and we'll have our radar up for whether that's ever appropriate. If you suddenly had a whole ton of money in the trust fund and you wanted to buy a chunk of land, you might go into an executive session to discuss strategy on behalf of the town around a real estate transaction or something like that. But if what public bodies get into trouble with is to say, gosh, this would be so much easier if we could just do this in private. Let's have an executive session. And that almost can never happen. So, just put it out of your minds for now. And,
Yeah,
you know, don't worry about it. We'll, you know, follow sort of the pattern that staff follows here in town, which is if we think something like that might come up, we would probably talk to the chair and put it on the agenda as potential executive session to discuss and inform everybody of that ahead of time. But in the normal course of things, don't worry about it. I think the place boards get the most in trouble with is like reply all email chains. And
yeah,
it's usually like something comes up over the weekend and then we come in and open our email and go, oh no,
yeah.
yeah, they're all on this chain, they all talked about it. And then, you know, sort of have to remind everybody and then sort of throw it into minutes and say, disclose like, you know, there was this email chain and, you know, we just try to keep the town's nose clean around those things. So, you know, if there's an issue, or a question, just one-on-one to staff works great. And we can always disseminate back out and say, you know, someone had this question and here's our answer for everybody. And we can talk about it in the meeting. I think that's it.
Yeah,
You mentioned the conflict of interest stuff and that, you know, the town has a conflict of interest ordinance. My experience is almost everybody I've ever worked with in Williston is overly cautious
Yeah.
about that and doesn't need a lot of reminding. You know, just keep in mind that appearance of a conflict can be almost exactly as bad as an actual conflict. And you know, again, it's always fine to reach out to Melinda or myself and say, I don't know if should I, be involved in this or not, and what's a real conflict, and when should I just disclose, and we'll either give you advice, or we'll say, gosh, we need to call town attorney and ask in order to give you advice, but we're here as a resource for that.
Yeah. Any other question? Yeah. Yeah, so then, I just wanted to bring up the committee charge. Keep in mind that, this charge is derived from one that was written when the, Housing Trust Fund was established in 2017. At that time, the select board, in the Housing Trust Fund ordinance, there's, basically states that the select board shall appoint a Housing Trust Fund Advisory Board. And so basically what we kind of thought of in the last year was, well, it should be a housing committee, not chiefly to advise on the housing trust fund, but just sort of should have a broader mission. And so the things that are written down in this charge, include other things like, besides making recommendations for the use of a housing trust fund, and establishing one or more permanent funding programs, monitoring program activities. Staff will mostly be doing that and then be reporting to you on that, at least once a year. And then an annual report, all committees prepare annual reports, and it goes, it's a page that goes into the town's annual report. And, as the year goes on, you can kind of figure out what will go into that report. Serving an advisory function concerning housing policy as a component of land use policy. We've kind of done a lot of that over the past year. So, I don't know, might want to give it a rest for a little. At least for now. And then developing an annual work plan. So that's something that you'll kind of do right off the bat, is just kind of think about the next year and what you want to do. And kind of planning it all out. And Darren will be helping us with that. And then, assisting in periodic housing needs assessment. We just had one conducted. We'll probably re-up that in, 3 to 5 years, something like that. And then outreach, community outreach, related to housing issues. That's a big one. And right now, the town is launching its next town plan update. So, I think it'd be a great opportunity for the housing committee to get involved in that, and, doing outreach related to the town plan, and actually in helping to craft the policies and objectives of the next town plan related to housing. And then just developing partnerships with developers, nonprofits, state agencies, social service organizations to advance the community's housing goals. Research and make recommendations on actions the town can take to attract partnerships and funding from outside sources to support development of housing projects, of deeply affordable housing projects. And so that'll be a big, I anticipate that's going to be a big role in the committee, trying to strategize on how to do that, how to make those partnerships. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. You'll elect a chair and a vice chair tonight. And anybody have any questions about that?
Just the comment that it was a committee just like this that proposed that housing trust fund that
Yeah,
came into being in 2017.
right.
And that prior to that was a housing committee that tried to encourage affordable housing by using the sewer allocation point system to encourage people to
Right.
develop affordable housing in order to get more points that didn't seem to be functional.
Yeah, so, yeah, Charlie raises a good point that, you know, in the past, the town has tried to incentivize affordable housing through its growth management system, and you know, the results have been less than, I don't know, less than
Hopeful.
less than optimal, yeah. And that there were, you know, that the town has been thinking about having a housing committee for a long time and has set up a couple of different housing temporary task forces in the past to look at sort of more specific issues, like the establishment of the trust fund. So, yeah. All right. And Darren. Are you there?
I wonder if he is.
Maybe.
Oh, there he is.
Nope, still here. Finding the
Okay.
mute button and the video button.
Sure, no problem. I guess the next thing was just to kind of take a look at the resources that you posted. And I don't know, just wondered if you had anything to say about that.
Sure. So I will talk a little bit about what's up here, but maybe also a little more generally about other resources that we could go assemble for you or provide. So first, I used to work for the town of Essex not too long ago, and we just set up a housing committee there. It was a little more complicated than this one because we had to do it for both the town and the village at the time. But what that group ended up doing was interviewing a bunch of neighboring housing commissions to sort of get a sense of the lay of the land, what they were working on, what was successful and what wasn't in terms of advancing their goals. And so that's what that interviews with neighbor commissions folder is. It's just a whole bunch of information from those interviews. There was a standard list of questions, but it kind of went a bunch of different directions. So that's from both Chittenden County towns, as well as I think there might be some information in there from Montpelier, which has had a housing committee for a long time, also associated with their housing trust fund. So feel free to go through that. And let me know if there's any questions, although I wasn't actually part of that interview process. It was their committee members. And then going back a level, because this committee is probably going to focus a lot on housing trust funds and the use of that fund and how to manage it, I assembled some resources on how the Essex Housing Commission looked at this, again, just sort of assembling information from other communities about what they've done. There's a draft policy in there, and that's not official. It was just something that we sort of came up with. It never really saw the light of day, so I guess it is now in public meeting. But just some things to sort of get you started with, how to think about this and what other communities have done. The other thing I'll mention is that you may have heard of the Building Homes Together campaign. That's a Chittenden County wide effort to try and build, I think we're up to 5,000 homes in 5 years, of which 25% are affordable, at meeting that specific statutory definition of affordability. So know that there are also some resources through Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission's website. Let me put the link in the chat here. Some of that includes information on the housing convenings. Some of you were there on Monday, so glad that you were able to attend. Those are just a regional, get together with all the housing committees in Chittenden County, as well as some of our partners organizations. Here's the link to that page on our website. And you'll see the Building Homes Together campaign information there as well. So that's more of a public, it's a campaign. It's trying to get folks aware of the issue and committed to doing something about it. The last thing I'll mention is on our page of GIS resources, we have a couple of databases, and I'll put links to these in the chat as well. The Building Homes Together dashboard is specific to that Building Homes Together campaign. It looks at about the last since 2016 when we started the campaign, looking at how many houses we've been building, where they're located, are they affordable or not, what type of housing is that, how many units and so on, as well as, how are we doing with our goals. But beyond that, there is also a full housing database dashboard, which shows all the housing units we've ever tracked, going back until the beginning of time, or at least the beginning of Vermont history, and looking at, again, where are they built, what unit type, what town, and are they in our areas planned for growth or not. So there's a bunch of different ways to explore this and filter the data by clicking on the dashboard itself. You can blow up certain elements of it. You can click on a bar to sort of filter that out on the map. Really good resources to sort of get you started exploring these issues. And happy to answer questions, or if you're wondering, gee, does anyone have information about this? Please reach out. We probably do, and if we don't, we'll probably know where to find it.
Darren, can I share out this link to the committee?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Oh, sorry, I direct messaged you. Yep, sorry, that should have gone to everyone.
Yeah. Cool. All right, I will do that. I'll share out the links that he just shared and the to this resource page. The other thing I wanted to mention, I added, whoops. Oh, what happened?
We go check that on our end.
There's something I added to this. I don't know if that's why it's not letting me open it. Oh, now there it goes. Okay, cool. I put together a list of other resources. It'll be up here on this page. Striving for Equity is a new, well, it's not really new, but it's a program through CVOEO, Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. And it's a focus on housing, and they're doing a lot of outreach, starting like last summer, but going through this winter to housing committees and really trying to support housing committees in their work. So they have, I've listed a bunch of resources that provide some tools for outreach. The Housing Ready Toolbox is, that provides just a whole slew of resources. Then there's a bunch of, there's Housing Demystified, there's messaging for affordable housing. So please, feel free to explore all these. The other thing is that I'll just share their programming schedule if I can. So as part of this Striving for Equity program, the CVOEO is hosting monthly or bi-monthly meetings. There's some monthly housing committee drop-in meetings where a bunch of housing committees get together and just have conversations about successes and challenges. And then there's also more formalized workshops. There's one tomorrow, if you can stand to go to 2 meetings in a row, where they're going to do a workshop on the housing data website, which might be really useful, just navigating that website. There's a lot of resources there. So this will be up on the resources page. And
just a couple of things to mention there. I definitely would recommend going to that CVOEO housingdata.org webinar if you can. It might be recorded, so we can also share that out. But that website, housingdata.org, is a wealth of information. It's where a lot of the data in the housing needs assessment came from. It's ultimately from the Census Bureau, but it's really nicely organized there. And Melinda, I'll also mention that I had a housing support resources list as well in the folder there, so we should probably just consolidate those.
Yeah, okay.
But
Yeah,
yours is a little more up to date and specific.
Yeah, I will, let's do that. Great. Okay. Look, ahead of schedule, how about that? So. Anybody want to be chair or vice chair?
And sort of, I know sometimes they work closely to help out and help getting the agendas ready and things like that. I don't know if there's any. Some of the committees I've been on, the chair would be, say, with staff beforehand, or. if
Yeah.
something that's included, or.
Yeah, usually that, we do that with planning commission, I do that, with energy committee chair. And it might be, you know, we actually get together and meet, or it might be a phone conversation, or it might be, email conversation about the next agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth noting here that, town staff handles minutes, handles writing and posting agendas, all the sort of the grunt work. So really for the chair, it's, showing up and running the meeting.
Yeah,
But increasingly, we find that having just a quick conversation or email with the chair ahead of a meeting, just to say, hey, this is what we think is gonna go on the agenda. Is there anything you wanna add? Is helpful.
Yeah.
But we try to make it for citizen volunteers relatively, painless to step up and lead, so.
yeah,
I have some experience doing that and would be willing to, but I don't want to push myself on anyone. I was chairman of the school board for 3 years. So.
Yeah.
go ahead.
I cheer the other two task forces, so I'm also willing to. I could be your vice chair. I think all of us have probably chaired. Run companies and that sort of.
And the other thing to note is it doesn't necessarily have to be like a long-term, like once a year, you can sort of revisit and say like, and just, yeah.
If you don't like the job they're doing, you can do it faster than that.
Yeah, we try to check in with every committee around the turn of the fiscal year when we're trying to wrangle annual reports and go over sort of nuts and bolts. So this might even be something we would do until,
Yeah,
July.
right.
And then get it on the fiscal year schedule after that.
Yeah.
I nominate Charlie.
Right.
For chair.
Thank you, Charlie.
Absolutely.
Okay. Wanna, vote on that, or do you wanna nominate a vice chair and then vote on that collectively?
Slate.
Yeah.
Running mate. Well, I'm willing to be vice chair.
I can second that, and we can vote it as a slate.
Okay.
For truth in advertising, Debbie and I are in Rotary together, so we see each other. So we.
See each other Thursday morning. We'll see each other very shortly. Yes, tomorrow morning.
Oh, my. Okay.
And watch baseball in between. Yeah.
Want to take a vote? All in favor, say aye. Not used to this. Anybody, any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it.
Great. It's the last time you'll have to call for a vote on something.
Yeah.
Used to that. It's weird. Okay. Well. Feel free to take over now.
Take it away.
So the question on the wall is, what topics of interest do we have for future meetings? And they have 2 suggestions. What do we want more information about, and what would be helpful to help us set our direction?
I think we got the brief overview of the housing needs assessment. For that, I think.
Yeah.
Is that something, do you want an overview of the housing needs assessment or
I think that would be really useful.
yeah, okay. All right.
What we have in front of.
Yes. Just stop my sharing. Mm. All right, okay, here we go. All right, so, I'm gonna go over this really pretty briefly, but we had a housing needs assessment done, last winter, Chittenden Regional Planning Commission helped with that, and, Vermont, Finance Housing Agency helped as well, and staff worked on it too. And basically, you know, we came up with 7 key findings. And I mean, number one is the town doesn't have enough homes to support its workforce, and the chart that you can see up there kind of illustrates that. This is a jobs to homes index, and that's an index that's used to kind of as one metric of housing availability. And Williston sort of stands out from other communities in Chittenden County as being pretty out of whack. Yeah, it's something like almost 3 to 1 jobs to homes. So that's, you know, for every 3 jobs, there's 1 home. And doesn't necessarily mean that you have to provide a home for everyone who works in Williston, but a healthy balance is considered as 1.5 jobs to 1 home, and Williston's pretty out of whack. So
Part of that is probably because we have more jobs than a lot of other towns, right? And
yes,
B, we've been growing faster than other towns, right?
Um,
So it's not quite as bad as it might seem.
Right.
Or at least it's attributable to certain.
yeah,
factors.
yeah, absolutely. And you know, so this just gives you an idea. If we wanted to try to reach that healthy balance of 1.5 to 1, we need about 3,500 more homes without adding any more jobs. So that's just one sort of, you know, goal to, not that we're gonna attain that goal, at least anytime soon, but. And this just sort of explains, and I think this is a little bit of what you mentioned, Debbie, is, this is kind of over time, what's happened, to jobs, and what's happened to this ratio, and what's happened to, the number of homes in Williston. And between 1980 and 2000, that jobs to homes ratio really shot up, and that's when the town added a huge number of jobs without really adding proportionally the amount of homes that it should have been adding. And then, you know, they call another term for that is the spatial mismatch. And this is a paper that was written in 2001 talking about this, basically how, you know, residents are living far from available jobs. Employers can't find people to fill their positions. Again, in Williston, employment grew by 112% during the 1990s, 80s and 90s, without a corresponding increase in homes. Darren spoke about the Building Homes Together campaign. It started in 2016 to 2020. The goal was to reach 3,500 homes. We exceeded that goal. And however, the goal for building affordable homes was not attained. We fell short of that goal. There's a new Building Homes Together campaign starting in, Yeah, that's right. Starting in 2021, and I think, let's see. Yeah, so the goal is to create an average of 1,000 new homes a year for 5 years. I think we're falling short of that as well as the goal to create, and Darren, what's the goal for affordable homes?
Like I said, I believe it's 25%. I need to double check that because I'm not the
Yeah.
building homes together expert, but yes, 1,250 homes over
Okay.
5 years. So it's 25%.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have an update just released on this. So feel free to check out the website for the latest numbers, but spoiler, that we're not reaching the goal. We will be hopefully getting closer to the affordable housing goal because based on some projections of what we know our nonprofit housing partners are doing, but it's still not enough.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the scoop. So, again, if you look at the jobs to homes balance and you look at the other metric, which is building homes together target, Williston would need 3,449 homes needed to reach a healthy homes, jobs to homes balance. That's a long-term goal. 594 homes needed by 2025 to meet Williston's share of building homes together, and that's more of a short-term goal.
And is Williston share by our population or by our workforce?
We did that by population.
Population, yeah.
If we did it by workforce, it would be higher.
It would be more, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing to remember when you see that graph with all the Chittenden County municipalities on it is there are other municipalities that have way more homes than jobs. Where most people commute in, but overall the county imports a labor force as well. So there's a lot going on there, and the intent of using that number isn't necessarily to put a sort of a wall around Williston and say it's all got to happen right here, but a big chunk of the larger regional spatial mismatch is coming out of the mismatch that's happening, here in town. And it's a consequence of adding lots and lots of jobs. And when you dive into the housing needs assessment, lots and lots of relatively low paying jobs into Williston in the 1990s and early 2000s, without a commensurate increase in the kind of homes that folks working those jobs would need.
There.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention when we're talking about these sort of how much housing is needed and targets, something that was included in the Home Act, Act 47, was that the state is going to publish housing targets out to 2040, I believe. And the regional planning commissions are going to be responsible for disaggregating that into the municipal level. So we expect to be working on housing targets for Chittenden County by municipality sometime next spring. So don't worry too much about trying to tweak these numbers. And also, even once they come out, I'd say don't worry too much about what that number is exactly, because Williston's already doing a lot of great work in trying to, move the needle there. And it's, as much as we try to sort of hit these goals, it's going to take a long time to meet them. And let's not get discouraged by not meeting those goals, but think, what can we do better? So yeah, just wanted to mention that. And that can help still, galvanize people to say, hey, what else can we do to meet this goal?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just really to point out that there's work to be done, for sure. There's a lot of work to be done. So another finding was that, no surprise, housing is becoming less affordable. Home sale prices and rents are increasing faster than incomes. That shouldn't be any surprise.
That's before the current inflationary spike.
Well,
Yeah.
This is just through, this time of year last year. So, this has gotten more bad.
More bad, yeah.
It's
Worse, yeah.
gotten worse.
Yeah.
The gap has gotten bigger, I guess is what I want to say.
Yeah, and then, this just shows you, cost burden for, all households, renters and owners, and, overall, about, 35% of Williston households are cost burdened. And for renters, it's more like over 60% of households are cost burdened. And most people who work in Williston can't afford to live in Williston. So about 75% of the jobs in Williston are in the service producing category. And I think the average wage of service producing is about, I'm not gonna remember this number.
I might be able to, so the average wage for a person working in Williston was 60,408.
Service producing is probably around less than 50 or 37. Right?
37,754, that's in retail, so it's 56 something for all service producing and 37 for retail, which was the highest, largest subcategory of the service category. So we have nearly 1,900 retail jobs in town, paying, below 40,000 a year.
Right. So these graphs just show you that, to the average wage worker, in Williston, homes are kind of out of reach. It just shows you the median home price, the bottom graph. And it's probably, I'm sure it's gone up since this, when we put this together. I know it's gone up.
Well, one person by themselves can't rent. Even.
And
There's my niece.
right.
Yeah.
If you're working, a single earner household can't even really afford rent in town.
Yeah, you guys let me know if you find that 1647 unit out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Probably has rats and cockroaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only gotten worse. And then, this just shows you, the ratio of jobs to publicly subsidized affordable apartments in, Chittenden County and in Williston. And Williston, in the orange is all apartments. The ratio is about 48-1. And that's for every 48 jobs, there's one publicly subsidized affordable apartment. And then when you consider age restrictions, so a lot of these subsidized affordable apartments in Williston are age restricted, some of them are. If you take those out, it's more like 100-1. So
I don't understand this graph. How can all apartments be less than apartments with no restrictions?
So that's the ratio of apartments, of jobs to apartments. So like for every, so the ratio is less when you consider all apartments with the age restricted ones included. But when you consider non-age restricted apartments, it's going to be less available. So a higher ratio of jobs to subsidized affordable, non-age restricted.
But this chart only refers to subsidized housing, so.
Correct.
Section 8, what other subsidies are there?
So there'd be the whatever,
Senior housing.
senior housing and, the, low income tax credit.
Yeah, so this is any sort of housing that was produced using any kind of federal tax benefit or program, or where the rent itself is
That
subsidized.
restricts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so what we're seeing here is that, for apartments with no age or disability restriction that are just subsidized on income, there's about 100 jobs for every one of those apartments in Williston. And, you know, the reason to have the blue and the orange bars here is just that a lot of what is publicly subsidized is either age or disability restricted, so, you know, not available to just anybody in town.
Yeah,
And, you know, all of these numbers are pretty daunting, no matter how you slice it. And, you know, what I encourage folks to think about is, well, which direction do you want the numbers to move? And then we can think about how fast they're moving as we evaluate performance of, you know, the
Yeah.
various strategies the town might undertake.
right.
So it's not like, oh, you know, the mountain is just so big, I'll never get to the top. It's like, well, am I going up the mountain or am I going down the mountain?
Yeah,
You
so,
know,
so just focus on that. Is it, you know, are we making it worse or better or, you know? And then there's also a mismatch between, household sizes and configuration of available homes in Williston. About 60% of houses have one or two people, and only about maybe 33% of houses are one or two bedroom houses.
I mean, to me, this is a huge strategy, right? Because we have a bunch of
Right.
people that are overhoused, that are like one or two people in a big house. So that, to me, given that age of our community means downsizing, so giving older folks options to downsize, I think.
Yeah,
This
know where to
just,
go.
yeah, just
Yeah.
brings from there.
I don't know.
you know, I'll say, I'm hoping to pull some numbers together
You
on
don't
this
have to
soon.
downsize.
But anecdotally, it feels like we're seeing more permit applications for in-law apartments, accessory dwelling units lately.
Yeah,
And that's great, because it actually you know, when someone takes their fourth bedroom and turns it into the first bedroom of a studio apartment in their home. We've taken two homes or one home and turned it into two,
Right.
and we've closed the gap on some of the size here. Whether that's happening in a meaningful amount or not, I'm not sure, and I'd love to say it's because we reformed some of our rules for ADUs. But I think it's because nobody's moving and nobody's selling, and people are looking for literally any option other than moving and selling at this point
yeah,
to meet their changing housing needs. And that said, it's great to see it come in, because every one of those either means, you know, it means a homeowner's got another income stream to help them afford the home they're in. It may mean that there's a home for somebody else being created as well, and,
mhm,
you
Or that
know,
might be where the caretaker is, so they can age in place. There's any number of good things going on with that.
all of the multi-generational household, the caretaker, even a homeowner who creates that accessory unit and makes it an Airbnb is generating an income stream that helps them afford to be in the home they're in. And so, you know, we'll spend some time talking about short-term rentals at some point, what their impact is locally, but the short version is not a whole lot. But even if it is that short-term rental, it's still helping someone else afford their home in a way that makes sense, and you're creating something that can become a home eventually if the owner chooses to do that.
mhm. Yeah, so this is just showing, the town's been making some progress on this, you know, getting this ratio a little bit more in line with, household sizes since, 2010. The red is the multifamily residential units, which, tend to be smaller than single family. There's been a lot more production of those since 2010. And this only goes up to 2015, and there's been more since then. So, well, that at least seems to be moving in the right direction.
But for this graph, single family, I mean, you have a bunch of homes that are duplexes or two, like 3-bedroom homes stuck together, but that would be an MFR here.
They are,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's,
included in that.
Yeah, so
it'd
the
be more
blue-
interesting to see it broken out.
Yeah, the blue bar here is only single family detached, and really the only point here is that it's flipped from majority single family detached to something more diverse. You know, since the early 2000s.
It's interesting because the things I'm reading indicate that a big majority of people who are looking for home ownership are looking for detached, single family homes, and yet that's not what's being produced.
Mhm.
It just costs a lot more to produce them. It costs more land and more infrastructure, and so by the raw numbers, if I did this graph and did it by number of acres used to produce single family versus multifamily, you would see the exact opposite. We'd be consuming far more acreage in Williston producing single family, and far less producing multifamily. But yeah, I mean, there's any number of surveys out there. The preference is for a single family home, and there's lots of reasons for that. Gas being dirt cheap and parking being free almost everywhere helps it a lot in this country. And some other things about just some of the benefits that come from being in a single family home, or preference and lifestyle. There's way more desire for that, but the way to make it cheap is to make more land. And we can't make more land, and there are some real serious consequences to making more land available for that pattern of development, which, as you all know, is something Williston has struggled with forever. And for all of our regulatory talk about density and concentrating things in a growth center, there's always someone in that process who raises their hand and say, why do you have to put all the growth there? Can't we just spread it around? And that's a valid question, that would support a more single family build out pattern, but it comes with some consequences that, I live in South Burlington, go talk to people in the SEQ, how they feel about that, the Southeast Quadrant. It's hugely controversial.
Spreading it around.
It's being spread around more, by virtue of some infrastructure being available. And, so that's the world we all kind of work in day to day, is the larger tension around, what the market wants to buy, what the developers want to produce, and what the town's willing to accept.
And the only thing I would throw in there is when we talk housing, we're talking, a house you build now is gonna be around for 100 years. So in 50 years, what will people want? Well, they still want single family housing. So I wouldn't say, because, in this town, that's in this community that skews older, that's what people like, but that's what's gonna be here in 50 years. I mean, I think the younger generations that's more environmental or whatever would say, no, I don't wanna do that. So it's another factor.
And then this is just, this is from Chittenden County, because the data at the town level is not reliable, but proportionally fewer African-American households own their homes than white households. About 83% of African-American households rent, versus 35% of households that are white alone. And then significant needs are existing for service supported housing. And then basically the vacancy rate is now must be below 1%. And a healthy vacancy rate is 5%. So there's, definitely that just points to the lack of available housing. And, something we just talked about, where the new housing gets built, does matter. And in Chittenden County, 86% of homes since 2012 are in the growth areas planned for growth. 14% in rural areas. Williston, about 74% is projected to be built in the growth center in the next how many years?
7 or 8,
7
as
or 8.
far out as we could project with stuff that's in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And past
Just
performance.
Sorry,
What's
Matt,
that?
sorry to cut you off.
Oh,
I
go
just wanted
ahead.
to provide some context for this graphic and what areas planned for growth means at the regional level. We have this in our regional ecos plan, and it's inclusive of our downtown center areas, our metropolitan areas, which are not as dense and downtowny as downtown, but sort of the residential and commercial neighborhoods that support that. It includes suburban areas where there's existing residential, suburban development. and it also includes village centers, the smaller, more historic communities. So it's a range of different types of places. It's not just, the growth center where everything is happening. It's, there's some options there too, but that rural area is more of what you think of as, at least an acre per unit and mostly open space. So just noting that that might be a little bit different at the Williston level versus the regional level.
Mhm. Yeah, so anyway, that just shows you, the red is Williston's growth center. And then you can see the village, designated growth center. And that's showing you where most of the new housing is going.
What is the blue on that map?
Industrial. Yeah, that's, no residential is allowed there. And then that's pretty much it for the needs assessment. Anybody have any questions?
What is the current restriction on the volume of growth? Is it now 80 units per year plus what goes in the newly developed Glasser land? Or?
Well, there's a couple of components to that. So Williston has always, or for over 30 years, had its growth management system. And the definition of what a unit is has changed over time, but it's 80 dwelling unit equivalents a year, where a studio or one bedroom is half a dwelling unit equivalent, everything else is a whole one. And that change was made to encourage the creation of a diversity of home types. So until the bylaws were changed just recently, that every single home in Williston that was created, other than an accessory dwelling unit, had to be on that 80 dwelling unit per year schedule somewhere, and it had to go through a once a year competitive process with the development review board in order to move forward. Whether you were building one additional home, turning a single family home into a duplex, or building a 150 unit subdivision or a 50 unit apartment building. The most recent bylaw changes adopted by the select board and likely to go in effect next week basically take the incentive for affordable housing out of that competitive growth management process and instead elevate the inclusion of affordable homes into an entire alternate path around growth management. But if you're building an inclusive project, meaning a project that includes either 10% of its homes as perpetually affordable at 80% of the area median income, or 15% of its homes affordable at 100% of the area median income, you don't have to get that project on that 80 unit per year schedule anymore. You proceed through subdivision approval without competing with everybody else. So it's a faster and more predictable path to approval than the growth management path was. And so essentially, of all the things we incentivize in growth management, the bylaw change has plucked out affordable housing and said, this is the trump card. If you're going to be inclusive, you're going to move beyond that growth management process automatically. There's also exemptions for small projects and some types of what we call adaptive reuse. So if you have a building that wasn't built to be a residential building and it's more than 10 years old and you want to convert it into a residential building, you don't need to be an inclusionary project and you don't have to go through growth management. You just go and do it. It's very likely that just the level of affordability that happens in a project like that will happen naturally. And that's nothing to sneeze at, but sometimes if you make it favorable enough, somebody will simply create homes that rent or sell at an affordable level. It can happen. So those are the most recent reforms. The thing Charlie mentioned is the Glazer project, which is its own special thing. It's called a specific plan. It is a large residential subdivision where the owner looked at that 80 unit per year limit, which also has a geographic component and is split up, and they want to build in an area that has very few units available. in the system over the next 10 years. And they said, well, we'd like to develop on our own schedule. And what they are proposing to the select board is to take the parcel of land and develop it at quite a bit lower density than would be allowed by the zoning, so fewer homes than would be allowed by the zoning. The zoning realistically could allow close to 200 homes there. They're proposing about 106. And would dedicate a large piece of that parcel, almost half of its overall acreage, including 15 acres of very developable viewshed land, would be conveyed to the town for permanent conservation instead. So that's another goal the town has sometimes, right, is to conserve open space. If your only goal was housing, you'd say build as many houses there as you can and make some of them affordable. That's an applicant who's pursuing a different goal, and that would also happen outside of growth management.
Sorry, am I wrong in remembering that I read that at this location class where they are gonna keep 10% perpetually affordable?
They are proposing some amount of affordable
I thought it
homes.
was around 10.
If it's 10%, I think it's 10% at 100.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't meet the inclusionary provision, but there would be a few affordable homes in there.
Okay.
And so this just gets more and more complicated the more we talk about it.
Special project.
Because that project was proposed to go around growth management, but because growth management's incentives contain some very important town values, part of what the planning commission subcommittee and planning commission did in reviewing it was that we still want to score it by that system. And where 30 points is the minimum score to even be considered to move forward on a 100-point scale, we want to see whatever is proposed make a minimum 50-point score in that system. So we don't want you to throw all of the incentivized things by the wayside in exchange for open space. We still want this to be what growth management would see as a high scoring project, even though it's not going to go through that system. So that was why under that rule, some affordable homes were also included in the project. And you know, it's like I said, it's all kind of a compromise. And it would be naive to suggest that open space goals and affordability goals aren't in tension with one another. They are. And you know, the cool thing about planning is you can have things that are in tension with one another, but you also have a spatial element where you can say, well, we'll try to achieve this goal here, and we'll try to achieve this goal here based on some of the characteristics of those different places within the planning area. And that's really what's going on there. Last thing about all of this is sewer allocation. And so the thing to remember about the limit on all new types of development in Williston is that we only have so much wastewater treatment capacity in areas that are served by water and sewer. And the town is and will continue to be very careful about how it allocates that limited capacity to new development. And it does do that in part to favor things like affordable homes. There's a special pool of sewer capacity that the select board votes on each year that is only available to support the creation of an affordable home. But there is an outright limit there. There's only so much capacity. We look at it with the idea that what we have left ought to be managed in a way that there's enough for the next 20 years. But understanding that every time we look at it, there's a little less to give out. And slowly the focus in town will shift to, well, how do we get more capacity eventually as the town grows and changes? And there are some long-term solutions out there that the town will need to start working on. But there is this outer limit of the town only makes so much of that treatment capacity available for new development to purchase every year. And it's a first in line, money in hand sort of situation. And there are times when new capacity in one or more categories, like new commercial versus new residential versus affordable, when it runs out before the fiscal year is over and there's no more available to purchase until the year turns over. So there's just a real physical limitation there that the town also has to manage for the long term.
Can we purchase that capacity from Essex?
We do. And, you know, we've gone through a number of cycles purchasing capacity. And we're probably reaching the end of being able to purchase any more. Essex Junction and Williston basically split the capacity of the plant in thirds, and we're pretty close to that. And all three communities have some potential to continue growing, and you know, some town plan or city plan goals that are only achieved if they do continue to grow and evolve. So we're all kind of looking at it the same way. It's a dwindling resource that we have to manage. But you know, to think about the way those different kinds of use are in competition with one another. You know, one brewery might be like 2 years worth of residential growth. You know, and you still might want to support that brewery, either just for diversity of industry in town or for jobs or for something like that. But it, you know, it costs you something. It's gallons instead of dollars, but it does cost. So just something the town has to continue to be aware of and, you know, manage carefully while also actively working on a longer term solution.
And affordable housing pretty much goes where the sewers are, right? It's an important factor in making it affordable.
Most of Williston that is not on water and sewer doesn't have very good water supply or ability to create ground-based septic disposal systems. You know, one of the only exceptions, we just did a town plan public input event at Williston Woods. And well, gosh, why is Williston Woods here? There's this density and this affordability, and well, it's sitting on a big pile of sand. It's on a big pile of Winooski River sediment from after the last glaciers went through. And you can have a great big community wastewater system there. And it's relatively low maintenance and inexpensive to construct. It's easier to manage stormwater in Williston Woods because water runs off the side of the road. It's, you know, right down into the ground. It's great. Most of Williston that's not on water and sewer faces much more challenging constraints. So, and you know, Lisa, another really good point about that is in the old growth management system, when we were trying to sometimes incentivize the creation of affordable homes in agricultural, rural, residential subdivisions, you run right up against that same limitation where, you know, the developer saying, well, gosh, it's already going to cost me, you know, $50,000 a house just to build the septic systems that are going to go into this. How am I going to absorb the cost of subsidizing a home in that project? So, yeah. Good question.
Yeah, and our Habitat affiliate built a duplex in Shelburne that $60,000 just for stormwater runoff control. And how can you build affordable housing when you start with a bill like that?
Well, and you know, for folks, just your head's going to be full of numbers as you serve on this committee, but you know that right now out in the news, the cost of bringing a home to market in Vermont is about $500,000. So to buy the land, to absorb the permitting costs, to deal with the infrastructure, to pay for the people to build the house, to put the house up. And that's being quoted to us even as the cost of an apartment in a multifamily, not just building a single family.
So are we gonna be able to make proposals that'll be listened to about permitting costs and delay costs in trying to get affordable housing in town?
I would really like to see this committee have that conversation and research some of those questions of, you know, there is another reality out there, which is the things that the state and town require of new developments add cost to those developments. And there's time costs, there's procedural costs. There's things like having design standards that add cost. We have development patterns in which we allow vinyl siding and in which we don't allow vinyl siding. And I was recently told that requiring hardy plank over vinyl adds about $15,000 to the cost of building a home. Part of it is it only takes one guy to hold up a piece of vinyl and stick it on the side of the house. But once you're into hardy plank, it takes two. Well, you just doubled your labor costs for the siding. So there's a materials cost, there's a labor cost. That's just one tiny little example. There are permit fees, water and sewer connection fees, impact fees that the town charges, Act 250 fees, and you're gonna hear a lot about that at the legislature this year, I think, about like what kinds of projects still need to go through Act 250 and therefore pay those fees. There are delays. There are all of the times when either our system or the state system creates the risk of an appeal. And you want to have an open process, and you want to have a process that people can participate in and speak out on if they think something's not right. But every time you create one of those public hearings, you're creating a notice of decision and a 30-day waiting period for someone to come in and say, that's not right. One of the realities of Vermont, and like it or don't like it, is it doesn't take a lot of resources to drag a project through state environmental court for a year if you don't like it. And that can really, I mean, even a really sort of groundless appeal of a development approval can take 6 to 8 months to resolve. And we're very appellant friendly in Vermont when it comes to development. So that's all out there. That's, sorry.
And that's,
Good news.
They tried to
I think Darren
change
was,
that last year.
did you have something?
to jump in on what Matt was just talking about, this whole, appeals issue. One of the things that a lot of housing committees around the state are thinking about and talking about is creating more of a culture of supporting housing as the public supporting housing, rather than being skeptical or critical of any housing growth to the point that someone might decide to appeal it. So that's just to put in your seed in your minds about something else that the Williston Housing Committee could look at as a action item, is sort of outreach to the public about the importance of housing, and talking about stuff that we just went over for the last half hour, and why it's important to have a little bit of a support for housing where that makes sense. Obviously, doing it in a sprawl manner isn't consistent with town goals, and people probably don't want to support that. But appealing a project in your growth center is probably not going to help anyone.
Other questions on the housing needs assessment?
Any question? Maybe not for today. We're charged here with, it says, trying for 50% of the median in the charge, but most of what we're seeing is like 80% to 100%, right? So I guess we'll get to that when we get to it, but it kind of complicates, right? Like,
Well, yeah, so like the 80 and 100% is the level of affordability that we could through inclusionary zoning maybe start to make a dent into that, but not the deeply affordable housing like the below 50 grand. So that's like sort of a goal for the committee, to see if, that would involve outside partnerships with housing development organizations like CHT, Champlain Housing Trust, Evernorth, or organizations like that, and to see how to bring to bear those partnerships so that deeply affordable housing could be built in Williston. And what will that take? So that's
it's like we're striving for that.
Yeah.
But right now, it sounds like we're not there yet. And we're kind of building.
I suspect that the only organization in northwestern Vermont that's building houses that are selling for under 50% of the median income is Habitat for Humanity, and that's done in cooperation with funding that Champlain Housing Trust brings into the package.
You just got $20 million.
See,
Yeah, that's cool.
So I think your point is a good one, which is we've really given the committee the hardest of the housing job. And what's exciting about that is the town's never really taken on the idea of like, let's build the capacity as a town to make deeply affordable subsidized projects happen. to take a sustained and active role in encouraging those things to come into being in Williston. And, through the adjustments we made, with the community made to the zoning and tap corners, very minimal setbacks for buildings, very minimal parking requirements, very flexible density requirements, important but not overbearing design requirements and things like that. We tried to really create a landing zone where some larger projects that could produce homes in volume could come into place. And so everybody thinks of like a big tall apartment building, but my favorite thing that we came up with was allowing for what we call row homes, where they're attached, maybe 2, 3, or 4 side by side, but not just those row homes, but they would each be allowed to have their own accessory dwelling unit, as like a garden level apartment. Where today, the only way to do an accessory unit is to be a detached single family home. So the regulatory environment, we've really tried to find all these ways, as we've talked about tonight, to make it an attractive home to attract those agencies in. And then, thinking about, do we find a chunk of land that we can hand to somebody who will build homes on it? Is that a focus of spending the trust fund? Or is it, some of the activities of what you'll hear about called a land bank might do, where you purchase a property that's on behalf of the town that's in some way distressed, and then deal with the things that are making the property distressed, whether it's an environmental assessment needs to be done, or there's just an issue around clear title, or a building needs to come down and nobody's got the resources to take a building down. But if somebody does that, they can then sell it off to somebody who's going to create a public benefit project on it. So it's the hardest stuff, but to me, it's the most exciting stuff, because if we can support you as a committee of people who become really well informed about how this stuff works out in the world, and then you've got those special glasses on where you start seeing those opportunities show up in the town, and you start, knowing who the people are who have those properties or who might be interested or amenable to partnering. If we go to conferences and people do these presentations about, here's how we redeveloped this block in Bennington, and there'll be this diagram of where the funding all came from.
15.
And it's like
Yeah.
40 different things, all in the perfect right order, and all of these partnerships. And behind all of those little things in the flow chart, there are relationships that people had to form and trust that people had to build within the community to get there. And that's the sort of the people power that I think having a committee, it's not something we're ever going to be able to create as staff, but we can support it. And, it's probably a pretty long haul. I hope we have some really quick wins and everybody's out there with the little golden shovels real soon on something. But, that's to me is like the real power of the committee. Is not even what we might see you do in the next 10 months, but what we'll see you do in the next 10 years. It's my pep talk.
But I mean, related to that, and I haven't read all these things that you've pointed us to, and maybe these are in the minutes from the other towns and how they're addressing it, or maybe Darren knows, but how do you get those relationships and see what those deals have looked like? See, where do you even sort of start?
Friends and neighbors, I don't know.
Well, that's
Darren,
there's-
something.
We've done a lot.
Go to CC.
I've got to say, our parent group with housing for people with disabilities, we've reached out to Vermont Housing and Family, we've reached out to Vermont Housing Conservation, to CHT. And part of it is people who knew somebody on that board or that committee or that somebody. And a lot of it is people don't know. It's like we say to people, I've got a lot of friends who they're starting to retire and they're traveling, and they'll be like, oh, so when are you gonna start traveling? And it's like, yeah, I have this kid here. I can't just leave him in the house and take off on a trip.
Mhm.
And it's like your friends don't know your situation. And so people, your neighbors don't know that your kids can't afford to find a house here, or that your family can't afford to rent in town, and so it's just, a lot of it is, I mean, I keep thinking, you read on Front Porch Forum, these people saying these things about developing affordable housing, like affordable housing is people who are drug users. And it's like, okay, median income here is 87,000. Somebody that at affordable housing at 100% of median income is not a drug user. So I feel like a lot of what we need is educating
Yeah.
the neighbors about what's affordable, what's increased density, what it can be like, not, you know, 17-story apartment building.
Yeah.
But
So maybe future meetings, topics of interest is something around communicating or
I think we
having
need
a
to do, like,
communication plan
have a
and
plan for-
educating.
There's a really excellent resource out there called the Housing Narrative Project. And it's literally about, I don't know, Darren, if we have that on the list of links, I just skimmed through it a couple weeks ago. But it's literally about, you know, collecting people's housing stories and how to tell those stories and how to build that community understanding of, you know, because the numbers are great for those of us who like to look at numbers, but the stories really resonate.
So he's sent the links.
I'll just throw in a quick work plug. All studies show that homelessness doesn't, drug use doesn't result in homelessness. It's usually the other way around. Homelessness results in drug use. So we're kind of like preemptively hoping to curb that, I think is an important way in which people would switch the way they think about subsidized and affordable housing.
Yeah.
But that take conversation and, you know, connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll hear some people will use the term, you know, housing first strategies around those things. And that's just over and over again coming out as, you know, and we have one of our co-chairs of the planning commission who works in public health in the state says, yeah, you know, you need to bring someone into stable housing and stabilize that home for 3 years minimum. If you're dealing with someone who's already trying to rectify some of those challenges and, you know, but it's the home that makes the difference. For sure. So.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a large part of that, sorry to jump in again, just a large part of that is feeling like you have, you know, a community around you that's supporting you. Like if you're in a house for, you know, if you're in transitional housing, you know, shelter or even just, you know, Section 8 housing, you know, you're not going to necessarily feel invested in that place. But if you are in that home for a year or 2 years and you start to know your neighbors and they start to see you as humans, not just, you know, the neighbor. I think that's what's really powerful about some of this messaging that I think is really going to help sort of facilitate the community conversation around how to solve these issues. And I think that, you know, you as the housing committee are, you know, the community leaders in that conversation. So I hope that, you know, you folks are excited to have those difficult conversations because they are difficult, but just by being here tonight, I think you've already made a good first step.
I did have a question about, under the recommendations, there's mention of a housing trust fund and advisory board. Has that been sort of, is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, okay. Cause that was the original recommendation, I guess, but, okay, so
Yeah.
it changed into what we are, okay. Good, just, we wanna, there to be another another border committee. Yeah.
So what else do we need for our next meeting?
Any thoughts on what, I guess what you need from us? What kind of information would be good for you to have? You know, we can call on outside resources to come in. We can do some research on our own and bring it to the next meeting.
Wouldn't mind having information of, like other cities or states that have done a really good job, good job. Are there other samples out there? Places where they've made a dent in the affordable housing problem, because it's really a national problem. And if some people have already, can be a role model, that'd be great.
That's the resource, had that, right?
Research.
Darren talked about how to.
Well, he put up some examples of what other housing committees are doing in the region. So that would be, another place to look. I can try to dig up some additional success stories and kind of bring them. But yeah, I looked through that folder, looked at some of the, some of the interviews with other committees. It was really interesting, actually. I think it'd be really informative to just kind of like, scope out what other towns have been doing around this stuff. And also, I also really encourage you to, if you can, to go to those striving for equity, drop-in meetings and workshops and stuff, because I think that'll be a huge help.
Was it worth having the Champlain Housing Trust or Evernorth? I mean, everybody talks about, come and talk to us about what communities they partner with and what they look for.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Should also mention that we maintain a training budget within the planning department that we do use to send committee members to trainings. So if you find something, it's a limited budget, so usually something you can drive to and
Nothing in Vegas.
a day. But there are, there are things that are put on by some of these organizations. There are things that CCRPC sponsors. There are things that Vermont League of Cities and Towns sponsors that are great to go to if you have the time, and we can help with, paying conference fees and mileage and things like that, to assist with that. We just ask that anybody who does that comes back and tells the group what they learned.
Is there some master list of possible things to do?
Yeah, I wonder if it's in
I
there.
don't know.
Huh.
I could extract it from my email.
Yeah, right.
I feel like I get 3 a day about one thing or another,
Yeah,
but we can have our radar up for ones that make sense to
Oh,
share with the
didn't
committee.
mean conferences, I just meant like sort of things
Oh,
that we
things
can
to do.
do, like steps we can take.
steps to take,
That
yeah.
would do X, Y, and Z.
Well,
Is that what we're trying to make?
I think a good place to start is to go to, let me see if I can bring it up again, is to go to the housing. What is this? Here it is. Housing data, website or toolkit, here, let me bring up this. Resources. Yeah, the Housing Ready Toolbox. This talks about first steps, talks about, it's just a whole slew of resources. This is like, if there's a master list out there, this is probably it. It's everything on this page. So it's definitely a good place to start if you're looking for ideas and of ways to get started. For
Under
sure.
that housing committees link, Melinda, there is actually a potential housing committee activities section at the bottom there. So, well, I think that probably answers your question.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Conduct a needs assessment.
We did that.
And Williston's done most of these, so I mean,
This is a good
we might
one.
have to expand the list, but
Right. Ensure your municipal plan supports housing. So again,
You
like.
guys have done that.
Well, we're launching the update, so, you could have a really important role in drafting the housing chapter, the next housing chapter, and kind of one thing you might consider doing is kind of looking at the existing plan. And our senior conservation planner has been discussing the existing plan with the Conservation Commission, and basically runs a survey before each of these discussions saying, like, here's a policy in the old plan. What do you think about it? Do you agree with it? Do you think the town has met its goals? So we might do something similar, as a way of discussing.
I have a question. Has the town projected what the housing trust fund might grow to over, say, 5, 10 years? I know that's tough in the beginning.
So no,
It was,
there's really two possible sources of funding that are likely for that. One is, just allocation from the general fund as part of the year-to-year budget process, the same way the select board funds the environmental reserve fund for open space. The other is if somebody builds a significant size market rate subdivision and needs to contribute to that. And, I don't think either of those are likely to generate much more than $50,000 a year.
Okay.
Unless there's sort of a fundamental change in the way the town starts spending its money. And I'm gonna leave it just sort of said that way and go back to the plug of getting involved in the Williston 2050 town plan process, because, one of the things that happens in town plans, Williston, number one, is way better than a lot of other places. We write a plan and we really do go put it to work. And there's things in town that are evidence of that all over the place, where we don't just put the plan on the shelf after we get done writing. We go try to achieve things that we set out there. But it is sort of long range and kind of generalized. And my goal for producing this plan is for the goals and policies to be a little more specific and for them to be prioritized against one another. So you would have a housing section and you might have 10 or 15 things that you want the town to do, but you also, we're really going to challenge the town to say, well, what's the first thing? What's the most important thing? What's the most necessary thing? And sometimes that's also going to be the most expensive thing. And I think that's a dialogue that is hard to have. No one likes to talk about money. No one likes to hem themselves in by identifying dedicated funding streams for things. Williston particularly has always avoided that. It's a general fund that, we think about once a year, and then there's a capital budget for long term. But if in some cases you may arrive at an answer that says what's really going to move the needle is a significant, funding push. That's a hard conversation, but it's probably one that if that rises to the top, it's one that should be had, and it should be had in the context of a town plan long before there's, sort of dollars and cents on the table. And, I think we're hearing that from the Conservation Commission parallel about the Environmental Reserve Fund. I think there's members there who've felt that way for a long time, that it's great that we put money in this, but the idea that we put money in it when we have money and then, when we don't, it's kind of the first thing that goes overboard means it's not a really steady stream, nor is it especially up to the task given the cost of conserving land these days. And so there's a balance, there's a tension, and there's opportunities that you can go after and opportunities you might miss as a result of that. So I really hope that this entire long range plan pushes everybody a little bit to think a little bit harder about those sacrifices and trade-offs in a general way. And then we go and do what we've always done, which is say what we mean and go try to do it. But we had the same conversation about energy, right? When the energy plan was adopted, it's like, hey, we're not making any budget decisions right now, but we want to have an energy coordinator. And then we had a sort of hard conversation in the plan process, and then we had a really hard conversation later on about, are we really going to budget to add an additional position to the planning department that's going to focus on achieving these new goals the town's set up for itself? And that was harder.
Yeah.
I think. And there was a lot of sort of citizen support that came out for that and said, no, we want to make, really going after this is a priority. We kind of threw community development in there, knowing especially around housing that, that was coming, and that both housing and energy from the perspective of a town are going to be more project-based things. I mean, we have fine-tuned that zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we'll never touch it again, because we always
But
will, but
We're kind
man,
of done right now.
you're squeezing that side of things pretty darn hard now. And the town's getting bigger and more complex, and the conversations I think are getting a little more challenging. And, I think the more that the town plan takes those issues on head on and doesn't kick them down the road, maybe the conversations when it is budget time get a little less painful. So, you know, you might have an action item that says, figure out what it would really cost to make the kind of
Yeah.
progress that the town would like to make on some of these goals. And are we budgeting for, you know, what percentage of that are we budgeting for? Are we willing to budget for?
So what do we need to talk about next month to help move us on the way to there? Do we need to start with the top of this list and the part that's above this on the page and begin to work through that toward?
Well, I wouldn't want to take you off track into just a town plan conversation.
Well, I just would like to say, any of you that have not, or do you still have more of your sessions
Yes,
going on? Any of you who have not yet gone to a Williston 2050 planning session really ought to try to do it.
if you can do Saturday, that would be great.
Yeah.
We've
That's
got
the one
room.
that's short of people.
Under
We got room.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be there.
And it was good food too.
It was serve snacks and yeah, I don't know if you want to say more about sort of how that went for you, but
Well, I just felt like the work that the planning commission has done on setting that up and the way that they've structured the whole thing is really aimed at getting at what the sense of needs really are in the community on all of the areas that go into community development, transportation and housing and all of those things. And they've just done a really great job of preparing it, and we all ought to try to participate. You were the same session I was, right? You were the same session I
It's
was.
active, engaging and fast paced.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
I don't think I'm gonna be around in 2050.
Totally with you.
I'll leave it this way.
Planning for the next generation.
Yeah.
So are you going to be sending us the links so that we can read all of these
Yeah.
things soon?
I will definitely send you the links.
Okay.
Is it worth talking with, is it Heinsberg, where there was that huge donation of land and Champlain Housing Trust and Habitat? Are
yeah, it
building a
was
huge-
Heinsberg.
Yeah.
Right, and so bringing that deal together was like 3 years, wasn't even with donated land, right?
It's still in
Right.
process.
Yeah,
Well,
Even with
Still at
donated
least a
land.
year or two from even really starting any sort of finality.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a
But I guess that,
8-unit development in Underhill that has been 3 years in process, and they hope to break ground next year.
8 units.
so I guess for me, I just need to understand, why is it so hard? Why are these things so hard? And what does the town need to do, or what does this committee need to do to facilitate it? So I don't know how to get up to speed on that.
Well, truth is, they're about 5 developers that own all the land in Taft's Corners. And some of them are nicer than others. Some of them are more interested in lining their own pockets, and some of them are more interested in, you know, doing things for the town, but. I mean, talk to anybody in the DRB and we know, or if these guys don't wanna tell who some of these people are.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, the legal process is just long, even with donated land, you gotta go
Mhm.
through,
Yeah.
go through a legal process. Before you even get to the point where people start specking out the property and doing things like that, but it'd be nice, instead of 3-4 years, we can get things done in maybe 2.5, that would help out a lot, but. Yeah, putting together deals, these type of deals they're always multi-year, it just.
Yeah.
There's that conversation period that starts, you know, sometimes it takes a year. Just in the initial conversation before you really even find out you have something that you can move forward with, and then it starts moving along, once you can kind of get to the planning process.
So it is 8:00. So that we've come to the witching hour, and we haven't really come up with a plan for our next meeting. So as you realize the things that we need to talk about, why send them to Melissa, and she will communicate with me, and we'll put together the agenda for the next meeting. Is that
Yeah,
reasonable?
that sounds good. Yeah.
Is there anything else that we need to do tonight before we adjourn?
We're fine, we have till 2050.
Yeah.
well, thanks, congratulations to our.
Yeah,
chair and
thank you.
co-chair.
Thanks.
Thanks for taking that on, and Look forward to working with all of you.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a good staffing at yet another meeting.
Ditto.
I have a hard time remembering names. So could you make tent cards for us that we could set in front of us?
Yeah, we could do that.
at one of the meetings?
Totally do that.
Yeah.
All right,
I like to.
bye. Thanks a lot, Darren.
I'm sorry.
No problem. See you next month.